Jack says, I'm helping. I'm holding down the carpet. Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. And today I'm going to start another part of the garden. Now, if you've been following us for a while this year, you'll know that it has been a very challenging year. We have had very poor germination, no matter who the supplier of the seeds was. We have tried some new equipment. We now have our doubts about some of it, and we're considering the fact that perhaps some of our new equipment, which we're very pleased with because of the quality of it, does not behave the way some of the old equipment does in terms of wicking water and things like that. So instead of continuing with our new equipment, we're going to go back to some older stuff we have. We have these wonderful trays that we got a couple of years ago from Hoss Tools. They're big bottom trays, they're sturdy, they're the kind of things you can run over with a car practically and they'll still be fine. They should literally last a lifetime or pretty darn close to it. And then I have a whole stack of little pots, and I don't usually start things in pots very often, but for certain types of vegetables that grow very quickly and get very leafy, like zucchini and yellow squash, cantaloupe, cucumber, things like that, sometimes planting in a larger size cell and then having the ability to move them apart a little bit can be helpful. Due to a lot of different circumstances, including early bad germination, incredibly horrific weather, technology problems, needing to travel for business, all these things, we decided that we would postpone starting some of our vegetables until later in the summer. Now, in some places in the United States, like the South, for instance, say Georgia, South Carolina, maybe even up as far as Virginia, people will plant more than one crop. And I don't mean just like harvesting radishes and then when they're done, growing radishes, when they're done harvesting, you put something behind it. But I mean actually planning to do like, an early batch of squash and a late batch of squash or something like that. We don't normally do that here. We normally just start things in the spring and let them go until they freeze to death in the fall. We have discovered over the years that sometimes, and we discovered this purely by accident, that sometimes postponing planting certain types of vegetables that are particularly tasty to pests, like green beans and husk cherries, even some of the cucurbits like cucumbers and squash, putting them in a smidge later seems to actually improve our situation in terms of having to deal with pests. It seems like the years that I have grown, and you'd have to do like a 20-year trial in order to be certain that you weren't getting sort of random effects. But my impression is, from experience, that when I plant my green beans really early, unless I cover them completely, and I have done that and it worked well, but unless I cover them completely with row cover so that nothing can get to them, the green bean beetles sort of things will come in, the bean beetles and things will come in just droves if I plant them early. Now, I've heard this from some other planters too, that sometimes delaying when you plant something can work better in terms of attracting pests. So that's one of those things you have to work out for yourself in your area, especially if you're trying to grow organically, which we do. We do not use any non-organic pest controls in our garden. And we even try to use as little as possible of the organic ones. So, I'm going to sneeze. My sinuses are killing me this morning. We've been super windy for the last couple of days again. And the weather was lovely yesterday, but it was really windy. So, we're sort of suffering from that dust thing and the pollen thing. And yeah, we're praying for rain right now because that'll take a lot of the junk out of the air. I mean, I can see when I look in the sky outside that there's a sort of a brown tinge to it, that's dirt. So until we get rain, that's going to continue to be there, and it's going to continue to irritate everybody's sinuses. So what I'm using today for starting seeds is this. Now, as I said, if you've been with us for a while, you'll know that we do use a lot of stuff from Haas. Not everything, but we do use a lot of stuff. We have some of their seed starting stuff. We have, and you know, the trays and things. We buy a lot of their seeds, not all of them, because they don't carry everything we want to have. But we decided we would try this. In the past, we have used another product that they call Black Gold, and it is a pretty darn good seed starting mix. What we liked about it is that in comparison to the stuff we were finding down at the big box stores, it had way fewer sticks and stuff like that. And when you're starting seeds, you want a fine, non-stick filled, non-rock filled medium so that your seeds don't have to fight to get out of the soil as hard. The difference with this one is those are moderately sterile. In other words, they don't really have any fertilizer in them. Now, technically speaking, seeds have everything they need in them to grow. So until they get their first true leaves, they technically don't need fertilizer. But I find that giving them just a little bit can be incredibly helpful. They sort of hit the ground running instead of having to kind of grow and then kind of wait for something to happen and then pick up and go. So this seed mix has the usual things of peats and stuff like that, but it's also got things like worm castings and chicken litter that's been composted and green sand and limestone, all this kind of stuff in it that's supposed to be sources for various types of nutrition that your plant needs. The reason we're going to try this is there's times when I even see the big boys screw it up sometimes, but particularly as a small grower, you have to figure out when you're going to fertilize. If you're using a pretty sterile starting formula in terms of soil, there's really nothing for the plant there until you start to give it something. The timing of that fertilizer in a crazy busy environment, sometimes it just doesn't happen. You plan to, you mean to, you'll make sure things get watered so they don't die, because around here you don't have that option. You either water or the plants die. You screw up for a day or two and they are gone. They don't come back. Or they're so badly damaged you might as well throw them away. Having stuff in there. So we wanted to try it because it just made sense to us to not have to be sitting there, you know, peering over the plant's shoulder, so to speak, and hoping that you get them the nutrition they need at exactly the right timing. So we're hoping that this will make a difference for us. I've been keeping this in the kitchen by the back door, which is where I have a lot of garden stuff. We don't have a garden shed right now, so unfortunately there's a pile of garden stuff right next to the back door. And I've been keeping this here so that it hasn't been overheated in the greenhouse or anyplace else, and no more overheated than we are. And I'm just going to pour it out in here, and we're going to take a look at it. It's nice and moist, which is one of the reasons I wanted to keep it in here. I know that it'll dry out if it's in the greenhouse, unless there's, these bags may not have any holes in them. Most of the bags actually have small holes in them to let them sort of breathe, and they'll actually dry out. Now this looks really nice. It's got nice friable. I just did find a stick. There's a stick, but that's stick number 1, so we'll see. But in general, this is looking great. I'm liking the way it feels. I'm liking the moisture content. So I'm just going to try it. So all I'm going to do now is I have a list of seeds. I have a pile of seeds. I'm going to keep track. Henry and I spent a bunch of time this morning discussing exactly how many of what plant we want. This little forest back here is a second planting of tomatoes, husk cherries, a couple of flowers. Some of this is going to be going out into the yard today. Some of it we're waiting. We are going to have some new technology arrive on our homestead in the next, hopefully, 48 hours. We're going to take a look at that. It may be one of the game changers we're looking for. And we'll play with it. And that will determine, to a large extent, where a bunch of these seedlings are going to go once they're up and ready. So, let's get started. I'm just going to fill a bunch of these because, you know, if I was doing a tray, I would just fill a whole tray. And I just decided I don't have a tray that has cells this large. And I wanted to, because I'm going to be planting a lot of things today that are larger, things like the cucurbits and the squashes and stuff, that I just wanted to not have to transplant them until they went outside, basically. We're cutting it close in terms of being able to get these guys big enough to go outside before we need to go on a business trip. So, yeah. Let's get her done. Okay. See who's on top. Huh? The tomato plant is on top. Hosinator. We have one hosinator plant from a previous attempt at growth. Yeah, just one. And I need to grow more. I would swear that this had been opened before, but now it doesn't want to open, so I'm trying to not to destroy the top of this. It's possible that I used all the seeds from the previous batch, because these are small lots. I think these are only 10 seeds. One of the things I do like about Haas is a lot of times they will sell seeds in small quantities, because while it is awesome to be able to buy a half a pound of seeds, sometimes you just don't need a half a pound of seeds. So some of their tomato plants and some of their other stuff like that is sold in small quantities, so that if you just want to grow 10 plants and not 50, you can do that. So that's probably why this hasn't been opened. I think I actually planted all 10 seeds last time. Yep. And these are pelleted. Pelleted seeds look like little white things because they have a, it's usually kaolin or something, which is a type of clay. They have a clay coating on them that makes it way easier to handle. I'm just, stuffing it in the top and covering it. I don't have to fuss around because I can't see what I'm doing or anything else. I could probably even do this without my glasses, although I wouldn't. And we had decided we were going to try to grow 3 more plants. There we go. 3 plants it is. Now I need to label them. If you haven't heard my spiel about labeling plants before, you don't need to label if you're only growing one thing. Just don't. But it never ceases to amaze me the number of people who will sit there and go, yeah, I don't know what that is. Well, what if you really like it? What if you want to be able to grow it the next year and you don't know what it is and you can't find the packet? What if you're growing 16 different types of tomatoes and you want to be able to compare them and be sure that you've got, exactly the variety you want because you loved it? And I'm going to put a label on each one of these I'm using plastic labels. I got these for cheap on Amazon, but I am not using a regular Sharpie. Sharpies fade in the sun. And if you are in a particular area that has a lot of UV, the way we are, you need a garden marker. Garden markers are an alcohol-based ink that's, I don't know, it's got something else in it that just doesn't fade. So I'm just going to stick a little label. This is not a waste. I can usually use these labels for 2 or 3 years, sometimes longer. It depends on, you know, like if I'm growing something that is a quick, you know, up and out, I'll put those labels away. They don't stay out in the garden necessarily, depending on what it is, especially if it's like the cucumbers and stuff like that. I know what they are. This year I'm only growing one kind. I don't have to worry about that. It's just helpful when I've got the layout here to know what everything is. Johnny sells these garden markers. Haas sells garden markers. Most of your major seed companies now sell garden markers because there's very few things more frustrating than getting ready to plant out, and you've got, say, brassicas is an excellent example. I don't want to say all brassicas look alike because they don't, and once they get past a certain size, you'll be able to tell if you're familiar with the plants, and that's the big ticket. If you're familiar with the plants, you'll be able to tell which varieties you have because there's differences in the leaf shapes and stuff like that. But say it's the first time and you're trying 3 or 4 different kinds of cabbage or 3 or 4 different kinds of broccoli or something like that. They're all going to come out for that first couple of weeks looking absolutely identical. And they may not have identical growth habits. You might have some things that stay this big and other things that get this big. That can really mess up your planning if you don't know where things are. So, time to stop talking. Just get something done. Oh, that's cool. I've never seen this before. Haas Tools has included a label for Tachi tomatoes in their Tachi package. That is cool. That's something new this year. Now, it's not going to be super helpful for me because I'm doing individual pots, but if I was doing a whole tray, that'd be awesome. And usually I would. I'd be doing a whole row or something like that. But we're planting a smaller tomato garden this year because I still have like 9,000 jars of tomato sauce from last year, so I don't really need to can tomato sauce. I probably will, but that's just an option I have rather than a, oh my gosh, we're going to be out of tomato sauce situation. Well, that's cool. It's got the same kind of information basically as you would get if you bought something from a big box store and they had a little label. It's cute. If you see me struggling on this particular one, sometimes they don't have pre-printed labels. I mean, seed packages available at Haas. So they will just have this. It'll say premium garden seeds on one side, and then they'll put a sticker on the back that has all the information, including what year it was packed for, germination rates, the lot number, if it was treated or pelleted or anything else like that. And when they put that on, it covers up the bottom of the flap, and I don't want to ruin the flap because I want to have the ability to just fold that down with a little paper clip on it, because I always paper clip my seeds because they've started doing resealable. Johnny's also does resealable. Some other companies don't. But I find the resealable, and maybe it's because we live in such a dusty environment, I find the resealable parts to be, they might be good for one. They're not going to be good for more than one fold and unfold. So I just rather than having seeds running around loose, which is incredibly frustrating because then you're wondering what you have, I just prefer to go ahead and paper clip them. It's not that big a deal. I've got a big box of paper clips that's cheap. That's cheap insurance, as they say.